Tonight, dining in, Tasmania's restaurant and cafe owners prepare for a taste of normality. Also tonight, China snubs Australia's trade minister as a diplomatic rift widens. Give us our money back, the Australian holidaymakers left out of pocket. How a surge in home cooking left Australia one ingredient short. And a bid to get a special Tasmanian railway service back on track. Good evening, welcome to ABC News Sunday. I'm Angela Ross. Tasmania's restaurant and cafe owners have been given the green light to open their doors to diners tomorrow, but only for 10 people at a time. This week, stage 1 of relaxation of coronavirus restrictions begins in Tasmania. Playgrounds and libraries will also open, but numbers remain limited. But the Premier's refused to heed a call to reopen pubs and isn't yet considering unlocking Tasmania's borders.
Cafes across Tasmania are putting the finishing touches on plans to reopen to diners.
We're going to open for 10 people. What we're doing currently is we're just making sure that we make all the team are safe and all of our customers are safe.
Coronavirus containment restrictions are beginning to ease. Restaurants and cafes will be able to offer eat-in service again, but only for up to 10 people at a time.
So I'm doing it to re-employ some staff, to open up for the community who've supported me for the last 5 or 6 weeks. So the support has been great, but I want to open up so they can come in and have breakfast, lunch and dinner, so they can come and have a coffee so they can catch up with people they haven't seen for weeks.
Many are taking bookings only, some have a minimum spend for diners, and there are time restrictions on how long you can stay. It also means introducing a range of new safety measures.
How we wipe down all of our menus, how we wipe down all the tables and chairs, make sure that we're socially distancing. So just to make sure that our customers and our team are 100% safe.
Getting people to sanitise their hands when they come in and when they leave if they choose. Wiping down tables when we start with 10 people, wiping down tables and chairs in between seatings, only having 1 hour seatings.
But not every restaurant is rushing to open their doors to diners again. For some, it's not economically viable.
We seat up to 90 people at a time in better times. Staffing the venue and seating 10 people at a time it's not a viable prospect.
Some are opting to stick to takeaways at this stage.
Obviously, letting customer walking in, starting the whole dine-in, the whole cleaning procedure, disinfecting in between customers and all that. Gets a little bit, yeah.
If it's a beer at your favourite bar you're thirsting after, your wait is not over. Bars will remain shut for a while yet.
I'm just simply not going to play Russian roulette with people's lives with this. We will take public health advice and we will step through this sensibly and responsibly.
Parks, playgrounds and libraries are reopening, but only for up to 10 people at a time. Border controls remain, but Tasmanian residents will be allowed to quarantine in their own home. Up to 10 people will be allowed at weddings and 30 at funerals.
Continuing to control coronavirus in Tasmania is going to be a bit like running a marathon. We do have to pace ourselves. We can't act as though there are no restrictions. That would be a bit like sprinting for the finish line.
Restrictions are likely to be further eased next month. Edith Bevan, ABC News.
Tasmania's total number of coronavirus cases remains stable at 226, with no new positive results overnight. The most recent case was a northern man in his 70s who had been a passenger on the Ruby Princess cruise ship. Public Health says the man who tested positive on Friday was also a close contact of another passenger.
And that meant that they had a very significant period of time in which they were in quarantine. When they were tested, the history that was taken, the public health history by the nurses, detected very, very mild symptoms very early in their quarantine period.
There are now no active cases of coronavirus in southern Tasmania. There are 16 active cases in the state's northwest and 2 in the north. Meanwhile, the Royal Hobart Hospital will celebrate another milestone this week, with women's and children's services moving into K Block. A 30-bed ward will open for babies and children, and for the first time the hospital will have a dedicated ward for young people.
The wards have an Antarctic theme, recognising Hobart's pivotal role as Australia's gateway to the Antarctic and Southern Ocean. And we know from hospitals around the world the importance of art and design in alleviating stress amongst inpatients.
The wards also include an inpatient school, a play area and an outdoor garden. Australia's push for an independent inquiry into the origin of the COVID-19 outbreak has had a significant boost, with scores of countries jumping on board. The coalition of 62 states comes as Trade Minister Simon Birmingham warns China is becoming a risky prospect for Australian businesses. As political editor Andrew Probyn explains, Australia's souring relationship with Beijing might complicate the economic recovery once the health crisis is over.
On a suburban cricket oval is a marvel of modern medicine, a pop-up COVID clinic right next to Canberra Hospital. It went from this to this in just 35 days.
It was seen as an insurance policy. It's one of the few buildings where, we hope no one ever needs to use it.
In fact, there's a good chance this 50-bed hospital is never used because the COVID curve's under control. The shutdowns made that possible at enormous expense, the way out of the economic crisis getting harder.
The call ought to be returned, David.
Trade Minister Simon Birmingham's confirmed his Chinese counterpart is still refusing to pick up the phone.
It's not a reflection upon the Australian government.
Beijing putting Australia in the diplomatic deep freeze for demanding an international inquiry into the origin of the coronavirus outbreak. China's slapped bans on 4 Australian abattoirs and is poised to stop barley exports too. At least one premier's offering to act as an envoy.
Considering the long-standing trading relationship Western Australia's had going back many decades, I'm happy to help.
Advice flowing thick and fast within government too, some from its own backbench, not entirely welcome.
Being so entangled with an authoritarian regime has left our nation open to economic blackmail and boycotts.
But the Australian government's frustrated with its biggest trading partner.
I would expect that many Australian businesses would start to consider whether the risk profile has changed and may therefore look at other markets.
Diversification takes time. It takes years and years, decades, but the work must start now.
China accounts for 36% of Australia's exports, more than double the second biggest. So if Beijing does play hardball, it could cause significant economic pain. But having made its case for an independent inquiry into where the virus started, Australia can't and won't back down, however uncomfortable. That discomfort, though, might be shared. Confirmation late today that more than 60 countries are set to back an inquiry through the World Health Organisation. Andrew Probyn, ABC News, Canberra.
If there's one thing we all love, it's a holiday. But many people have had to cancel overseas trips because of coronavirus travel restrictions. And getting a refund for cancelled holidays isn't always as easy as it sounds. Alison Zhao reports.
For a travel-loving couple, it was the stuff of dreams.
The best and most luxurious train in the world.
But this South African odyssey never happened.
Really leaves a bad taste in your mouth.
Don and Bridget Bernard booked a $30,000 adventure last year.
And that looked amazing.
They've been refunded a third of their ticket, but $20,000 remains outstanding, offered as a credit to be used on the same package at a later date.
We don't know how our own health condition will be next year. I think there's too many ifs and buts about it.
The travel industry says money is tied up in a complex global system of suppliers. Airlines, hotels, restaurants and local attractions, all of which are feeling the pinch.
In that entire supply chain, there are contracts that include non-refundable deposits.
The terms and conditions for each holiday are different, so there's no general answer to what customers are legally entitled to.
It's not that easy to just simply get a refund. It's not the consumer's fault, it's not the travel agent's fault, it's not the tour operator's fault.
The ACCC says it doesn't have the power to enforce contractual rights, and it says it's not easy to determine whether a contract has been frustrated because Australian consumer law provides for unforeseen circumstances, like travel being cancelled due to government restrictions. The Bernards say there's been nowhere to turn.
It seems to me, anyway, that it's deliberately made difficult so they don't have to give you answers.
It's been a stalling, waiting for us to just give up and walk away.
But that's unlikely. Alison Shao, ABC News.
A wave of protests against coronavirus restrictions is sweeping across Europe. Despite the easing of lockdown measures in many countries, frustration is growing due to the economic impact. For many, life has become unbearable and they're pushing for a speedy return to normal.
They've been labelled COVIDiots, but their numbers continue to swell at protests across Europe.
I'm a human being and I would like to live and breathe without a face mask.
Despite some measures being relaxed, hundreds of Germans gathered for a second week, undeterred by warnings of a new wave of infections. In the worst-hit European countries, there's growing anger at the handling of the crisis. Banging pots and defying police, demonstrators in Spain called for their government to resign.
I have young sons and they are the ones that will suffer from this. It's not fair. We have to leave them a Spain that our parents left us.
Italian hospitality workers stood silently, fearing the slow death of restaurants and cafes due to the restrictions they still face.
The government is taking us on the road of certain failure, because to reopen today, it would be only a very sad and bitter failure for everybody.
Simply putting bread on the table was front of mind for protesters in Poland, who defied a police ban on gatherings to call for restrictions to be lifted. The growing mood of defiance also spilled over to the United Kingdom, where police moved on protesters in Hyde Park, arresting 19 people for deliberately breaking social distancing guidelines.
I wouldn't go home because I want my freedom of speech.
London police dismissed them as only a small group, but as fear of the virus diminishes, anger at restrictions is set to grow. Michael Troy, ABC News.
While the latest unemployment numbers showed the biggest monthly rise on record, the impact on Australians is even greater than the official rate suggests. About 600,000 people lost their jobs in April and unemployment hit 6.2%. But when you include the millions of workers on the JobKeeper wage subsidy, more than half of the population is receiving help. As Alan Kohler explains, high unemployment is likely to last for many years.
On Thursday, we learnt that the unemployment rate had increased from 5.2 to 6.2%, or 104,000 extra people. But 600,000 jobs disappeared. Commonwealth Bank told us this week via this graph that almost all of the growth in the money flowing into its customers' bank accounts at the moment is coming as government benefits rather than wages. These are all some kind of unemployment payment, either the dole, which is called the job seeker allowance now, or the new thing called JobKeeper allowance. The Treasurer said this week that 6 million people are covered by JobKeeper and 1.6 million are getting job seeker, which more or less adds up to what CBA has found. But only 823,300 of them are counted by the ABS as unemployed, even though they're not actually employed. If all those people were counted as unemployed, the unemployment rate would be, well, 58%. Thank goodness they're not. Imagine the national despondency if the ABS reported that the unemployment rate was twice what it got to in the Great Depression. Why aren't they counted? Well, because those getting JobKeeper aren't unemployed. And for those getting job seeker to be counted as unemployed, they would have to have been actively looking for work. And since the amount has suddenly doubled and is now enough to live on, a lot of unemployed people aren't bothering to look because they know there aren't any jobs anyway. So, lies, damn lies, and statistics, as Mark Twain once said. But the real world is places like this. The arts and recreation centres have seen massive declines in available work, and employment in restaurants and accommodation has collapsed as well. The government is budgeting for the temporary employment benefits to go for 6 months, and then for the private sector to bounce back and lead job creation. But will it in 6 months? A lot of private sector outfits are stuffed, never to lead job creation again. And for that reason, unemployment is a scourge that lasts. In the last recession, the unemployment rate went above 8% in December 1990, and it didn't go below it again until October 1997. Almost 7 years. And this recession looks worse than that one.
By the end of this month, health services in the northwest will have almost returned to normal. But some in the region are worried about the future of the Mersey Community Hospital's emergency department. The La Trobe Hospital's existence has long been the subject of political debate, but locals say the pandemic has proved it needs to stay and be better resourced.
For decades, the Mersey Community Hospital has been used as a political football. There's been fights to close it, federal deals to save it, and now many in the community believe the coronavirus pandemic has helped prove its worth. Roger G keeps a diary of every time he's been admitted to the hospital. He had a heart attack in the early 2000s and doubts he would have made it to Launceston or Burnie.
If it wasn't for them, I wouldn't be here, and that's a fact of life.
When the Burnie Hospital was forced to close by the coronavirus outbreak, most inpatients were moved to the Mersey.
Anybody in the health service kind of knows that the Mersey has to be there anyway, because as in recent times with the unfortunate amount of bed blocking and ramping that's happened in all the other hospitals.
The Mersey ED hours were reduced at the start of April. 10 days later, it was closed because of a shortage of locums to run it. After a 7-week closure, it's due to reopen at the end of this month, but only for 14 hours a day. The state government says it's committed to eventually resuming 24/7 operation, but the reduced hours are to ensure the safe delivery of services.
There is a concern that there isn't a deadline. There's a concern that there'll be a lack of will because it might be a bit more difficult than normal.
Residents have been fighting to keep services at the Mersey since the early 2000s. In 2007, the Howard government bought the hospital for $1, promising to keep it open. A decade later, ownership was transferred back to the state, along with $730 million to fund it for the next 10 years. Locals want to see a longer-term commitment to its future.
They should be all working flat out because we've got an ageing population.
I suppose what we want is emergency services. We want, to be able to have good services available quickly.
When coronavirus hit, the northwest was the only region in Tasmania without an infectious disease specialist. The state government has moved quickly to recruit one and says they'll start work soon. But health professionals say more permanent staff are needed in the northwest to improve its vulnerability.
I think this pandemic has highlighted some of the calls that certainly the ANMF have been raising in the not so distant past.
I think the structure that exists at present between the Northwest Regional and the Mersey stretches staff and creates a level of system vulnerability that we need to examine.
One idea has been to replace the La Trobe and Burnie hospitals with a single campus on the Central Coast.
We would have been in a lot of trouble if we'd only had the one hospital. So I don't believe it makes common sense for me to knock down 2 perfectly good hospitals and build another one for squillions of dollars. That's not pragmatic.
The Mersey's future is financially secure until 2027. After that, it'll be up to the state to work out how to pay for it. Monica Champ, ABC News.
Still to come on ABC News Sunday, a special report on what a typical day will look like as restrictions are eased across Australia, from gyms to office blocks, food courts to pubs. We look at how places will change to accommodate physical distancing rules. In the United States, the coronavirus-induced economic downturn is being dubbed by some the she session because it's swallowing more jobs held by women than men. The trend is happening across the globe and economists are warning it's unlikely all the jobs will return. North America correspondent Catherine Diss reports from Washington.
2 months ago, Tina Edwards ran a bustling day spa in downtown DC.
Mommy, open me.
Now she's a full-time mum, with coronavirus shuttering her business, schools and daycare.
I want to say we will be able to go back and reopen, but survive, I'm not sure.
Her family's living on her husband's income. She's relying on savings and donations to a GoFundMe page to make ends meet.
I don't know, how, with one income, how it's going to work. So I'm hoping that there's more stimulus.
Global shutdowns and social distancing measures are shattering female-dominated industries like retail, hospitality and education.
This is a recession in which is almost entirely driven by the fact that it's dangerous to be around other people.
This downturn is being dubbed the she-cession. That's because the majority of the 20 million jobs lost here in April were held by women. It's a trend repeated in countries across the globe, including Australia, and sits in stark contrast to the global financial crisis where men bore the brunt. The other difference this time, the closure of schools and daycares in many countries. It's an added burden for women who shoulder most of the home care duties.
Many women will have to choose their families. And so families are really desperate and just hanging on by a thread.
Countries are starting to reopen, but the danger of catching the virus and the threat of a second wave remains, hampering a quick recovery.
The reality is, are those businesses going to be able to rehire people? That we just don't know. How many bankruptcies are we going to see? How much downsizing are we going to see? And if those temporary layoffs become permanent, that's when this moves from being a short, sharp shock to a long, deep, ongoing recession.
Tina Edwards is trying to stay positive. She's started remodelling her business to safely space clients, a new world she'd never imagined. Catherine Diss, ABC News, Washington.
In India, at least 24 migrant workers trying to return home during the lockdown have been killed in a truck accident. Dozens more were injured as the truck, crammed with people desperate to get to their hometowns, collided with another truck in northern India. Thousands of migrant workers have been trying to flee India's major cities since the lockdown began nearly 2 months ago, which left many of them without jobs or pay. Many have set out on gruelling journeys on foot, walking hundreds of kilometres or hitching rides on trucks. Brazil now has the 4th largest coronavirus outbreak in the world, with the number of cases there surpassing Italy and Spain. More than 233,000 people have tested positive for COVID-19 in Brazil, and about 16,000 have died. The country's president continues to downplay the virus and has been very critical of lockdowns. And there are more signs that life is getting back to normal in Wuhan, the Chinese city where the pandemic began. People are once again dancing by the Yangtze River, now with masks and social distancing. Dancing outdoors is a popular pastime for many Chinese people. Panic buying saw the country's supermarkets stripped of flour as many turned to ISO baking. Milling companies struggled to keep shelves restocked, but Australia's biggest miller says it won't get caught out again. Landline's Pip Courtney has the story.
When COVID-19 forced families to stay home, many became creative in the kitchen. In Brisbane, the Cole family bakes most days.
It's been really fun for us to do something together, to experiment.
Harrison and Mia have loved it.
Give it to your friends and they text back saying, "Oh, it's so good, thank you." It's a good feeling to have.
Finding flour, though, has been hard, with supermarket shelves bare for weeks.
Is that going to be enough, do you think?
Milling companies were stunned by the spike in sales.
The retail has just been ridiculously high, about 70% over normal volume.
Manildra Group is Australia's biggest flour producer and has moved its main New South Wales mill to a 24/7 operation and hired extra staff.
That's 10 weeks ago and we're still doing that now and endeavouring to supply all of the supermarkets and people with the flour that they'd like to have.
ISO bakings put a strain on the country's wheat supply lines, but new equipment will see Manildra Group produce an extra 50 million 1 kilo bags of flour a year from July. Toowoomba-based organic miller Kyella Foods has hired extra staff and run double shifts to keep up.
In March and April, we're about 300% up on those retail type products.
people are falling in love with cooking again, and it's great.
Keen cooks can look forward to full shelves very soon. Pip Courtney, ABC News.
As the country slowly reopens, many Australians have been enjoying a return to normal. But of course, it's a new normal, with all types of places having to change the way they operate. For tonight's special report, we take a trip around the country to see how life is evolving. It's time to get out from under the doona. National Cabinet has laid out Australia's three-phase plan to lifting restrictions, but the reality of putting that into practice is only just setting in. Welcome to a day in the post-lockdown world. It's 6 a.m. in Brisbane and fitness buffs are back in the gym.
Heading to the gym is part of the daily routine for many Australians, and if you're like me, you can't wait to get back to it. But when the doors finally reopen, it's likely to look a little different.
Boot camps in the fresh air are likely to be a continuing feature, while inside, Joanne Johnson's preparing for when her members can return.
I think it'll be a new normal.
It's imagined the gym will have a cap on the number of people based on its floor space. And once you're in, that floor space will be clearly divided to keep gym goers socially distant at all times.
Members must book into class. We will then be able to allocate the equipment needed by that member.
It's not an option to share weights, and cleanliness is key. You may have added responsibilities each time you come to work out.
Things like having your own equipment allocated to you, it's also likely you'll be responsible for cleaning the gear as well.
Each space will be allocated with a container, obviously our detergent and their cloth.
Outdoor exercise may still be the preference. Just 30% of people say they'll go back to a gym anytime soon. But swimming laps at the local pool is still in limbo. Many operators can't wear the costs of making things COVID safe, while the number of lanes are limited.
It's 9 a.m. in Sydney and thousands of workers are arriving back at the office.
Office blocks across the city have been empty for months now, but they're about to come to life. This 39-storey office in North Sydney is normally home to 3,500 workers. The problem starts even before you reach your office floor. Most lifts are only a few metres wide and long, so adhering to social distancing rules means only 2 people are allowed in a lift at a time. Let's do a rough calculation. With 3,500 people in the building, 2 per lift means more than 1,700 trips. Each return trip takes on average 2 minutes. With 12 lifts, it means it will take 5 hours to get everyone upstairs. And once you're up here, what will the workplace look like in a post-pandemic era?
It'll be very different. I think the fact that we've worked so well flexibly for so long now, people will insist upon that flexibility. Some people will want to work from home, some people will want to be in the office, some people might want to be somewhere in between.
The traditional 9-to-5 workday is unlikely to stay.
We want a staggered start time as well, so we don't want everyone turning up on the 1st of June at 9 o'clock. We want people to come in dribs and drabs at different points of the day, and I think that will be a permanent feature of the workplace of the future.
There'll be specific entry and exit points in each room to ensure one-way flow of people throughout the office. Some businesses have even refitted their whole office space, installing Perspex barriers and removing computers where desks are too close.
So the 6 feet office is a concept that can help businesses prepare for a safe return to work. So when you enter your work zone, you go to your desk, and around your desk there is a round sticker. The sticker tells you what your safe zone is. It's a reminder for colleagues to keep that 1.5 metre distance.
The communal kitchen area will also have to change. The recommendation is not to share the microwave, cutlery or crockery. When lunchtime hits, finding food outside the office will also be a different experience.
It's lunchtime in Perth. All those office workers will be ready to eat.
Food halls have been deserted since the lockdown measures started.
But with office blocks and shopping centres reopening, the lights will come back on. At this Korean takeaway, getting the wok fired back up is an exciting step.
But I'm really happy to see people again.
Precautions are being put in place. McDonald's in the US just released guidelines for its stores. Self-service drinks machines are out and those self-service kiosks will be turned off too. Bathrooms will be cleaned every 30 minutes. Tables wiped down between every customer. In hospitality, hygiene is the safest bet.
So I'm hiding my mouth and nose so I can keep distance from customers anyway. And I also hand sanitizers ready. Whenever I touch the cash, I wash.
Takeaway will be encouraged to avoid overcrowding. But when dining in is allowed again, things are going to look a little different. This is how many tables would normally be here at Market Hall. Moving ahead, that's going to have to reduce and they'll be left with just this. Grabbing a quick bite is going to take a bit of planning.
Even after-work drinks won't be the same. It's 5 p.m. in Darwin and the beer is flowing again.
Here in the Northern Territory, pubs reopened on Friday. And what's happening here could be a sign of things to come across the country.
To be able to enjoy a cold one, there's a couple of rules that need to be followed. There's a 2-hour time limit at all venues. Like cafes, all tables need to be at least 1.5 metres apart. If you want alcohol, you'll need to buy food, and people must be seated for all food and drinks.
You know, I think about our poor brothers and sisters down there in Sydney and Melbourne and, you know, trying to work out how just 10 people in a restaurant's going to work. And here we are going, how are we going to make only 10 on a table work, you know?
While going to the pub isn't exactly what it used to be, after weeks of lockdowns, just spending time out with friends feels like a cause for celebration.
Yeah, I'm really actually surprised because I thought it would be like a lot more stricter or just like a lot more not as relaxed.
Beer out of a keg rather than a stubby.
And it seems the proof is in the pint. It's estimated 1,000 kegs were used this opening weekend in the NT. That's 50,000 litres or 100,000 schooners.
Many Tasmanians are used to rushing home at night in winter to escape the cold. Markets are set to reopen from the 13th of July. As the temperature rises, what are the chances we'll get to spend our summer evenings enjoying events that draw thousands of people, such as the Taste of Tasmania?
I'm hopeful that we can return to, it will still be a COVID way of life, but it will be a more normal way of life by the time that we get back to summer. But we'll be advised by public health along the way.
Getting out of lockdown is just the first step. The way we live has changed for good. Trains stopped running on the Ida Bay Railway in 2018 when the track in Tasmania's far south lost its safety accreditation. A group of volunteers says it has the financial backing to start restoring the track and get trains running again. But it needs permission from the state's Parks and Wildlife Service to start work.
James Shugg was a 12-year-old schoolboy when he first visited the Ida Bay Railway in Tasmania's far south.
By the time I was 16, I was driving trains with 80 passengers all the way down to the end of the line and back. We're going to need to replace quite a few of these sleepers. Yep.
Now, more than 40 years later, he's part of a group of like-minded enthusiasts wanting to restore the century-old line and its rolling stock.
We're not asking for a penny from the government.
From within our own resources, we've found enough funds to get a third of the track restored to safety accreditation standard and be able to run small tours in the coming summer if we're given permission.
The narrow gauge line was built to haul limestone. The 2-hour round trip to Deep Hole passes through areas that highlight Aboriginal history, the arrival of French explorers and early industry.
Usually we stop there and people walk along the beach and enjoy themselves, turn the train around and trundle our way back through the history, back to the present.
You can tell the history of Tasmania by the railway.
The most recent leaseholder poured hundreds of thousands of dollars into the railway and for years called on the state government to help fund major works. She was unable to meet the costs herself, and after a derailment in 2018, the rail safety regulator stopped trains from running. Late last year, the lease was ended. The 7-kilometre line has been a tourist railway since the mid-1970s, but it's always been run as a business. The Preservation Society says it should be non-profit.
So any money we earn goes back into the railway, which is owned by the Tasmanian people, and hopefully we'll get the whole line running as it used to.
It'd also allow the Society to apply for heritage grants. The Society put its proposal to the site's caretaker, the Parks and Wildlife Service, in December, but is waiting for an answer. In a statement, Parks and Wildlife says it recognises the historical importance of the railway and is continuing to prioritise maintenance, security and safety while its future use is considered.
We volunteered to help with the railway and it sucks you in and suddenly you're enmeshed and you'd lay down as a sleeper.
They hope it won't be much longer until their big plans are back on the rails. Loretta Lohberger, ABC News, Ida Bay.
Geelong midfielder Jack Stephen was hospitalised with stab wounds to the chest overnight. He presented at a Melbourne hospital with serious injuries and is in a stable condition. 30-year-old Stephen joined the Cats from St Kilda last year, where he was a 4-time best and fairest winner. The Geelong Football Club says it doesn't know how the injuries occurred. Police are investigating the incident. Exciting news for Tasmania's soccer players, with tomorrow's easing of restrictions meaning training can restart for some clubs. Training was suspended in March due to the pandemic, but Football Tasmania says sessions can resume this week so long as they don't exceed the 10-person rule. Clubs also have to submit training plans to Football Tasmania for approval.
There's the physical aspect, but we know that one of the things that our football community have missed is being around their teammates, being around other people within the club. And so this is the first step to getting back to kind of a normality that they would be used to.
Football Tasmania hopes competition can start again in mid-July. Competition golf will also be able to resume across the state from tomorrow. The Symmons Plains round of the V8 Supercars Championship held in northern Tasmania is scheduled to go ahead in November. Tasmania's largest sporting event was cancelled last month because of coronavirus. It will now be held on November 21st and 22nd. The Premier says it's too early to say if spectators will be able to attend. To the weather, and tonight's photo of kites flying over Royal Park in Launceston was sent in by Maria Jones. Today there were showers in the west, but elsewhere it was mostly sunny. The top temperatures were generally above average. The highest was 19 degrees at Ouse, St Helens and Larapuna Eddystone Point. It got to 16 in Hobart and 17 in Launceston. Yesterday and overnight, the highest rainfall was 9 millimetres at Queenstown. The national satellite sequence shows mid to low level cloud over the west of Tasmania, which extended across the north and east this afternoon. On tomorrow's synoptic chart, you can see a high pressure system will move into the Tasman Sea, influencing a north to northwesterly wind flow over Tasmania. Interstate tomorrow, it'll be partly cloudy in Perth and Sydney, sunny in Adelaide, Melbourne and Darwin, and there'll be showers in Brisbane. For Tasmania, light showers about the north will clear by the early afternoon. It's expected to reach 17 in Hobart and Swansea, 16 in Launceston, Strahan and St Helens, and 15 in Burnie and Devonport. Sunrise will be at 18 past 7. The coastal waters, northerly winds, the swell 4 metres in the west and south, up to 3 metres in the east and 1 metre in the north. The outlook for Tuesday, showers in the northwest and the Central Plateau will extend to the remainder of the north and west late in the morning. And on Wednesday, showers easing in the east and southeast in the evening, snow to 800 metres in the late evening, north to northwesterly winds becoming fresh and gusty, westerly in the afternoon and southwesterly in the evening. And that's the news for now. Enjoy the rest of your evening. Good night.